Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this review we're going to look at the Halo 4 Promethean Knight figure. This is the first of the Knights from McFarlane, so it's pretty exciting, pretty cool figure overall. There are some major hang-ups though, I'll point those out, but I'm going to say right off the bat it's a really cool figure and I do like it a lot. First things first, he stands, depending on how you pose him of course, he stands to the top of his back about 8.5 inches tall, to the top of his head about 7.5 inches tall, so he's got some good size to him for sure. He's definitely in scale. He's really big this way as well. I'll just give you a measurement just so you can see. He's about 6 inches from head to back thingies, whatever you want to call that. So he's definitely got some really good size to him. And he's got some nice weight. He's not too hollow. This part is a little bit hollow up here, but it's not too bad. It's mostly because of the articulation. So that's fine. We'll get to that in a few minutes. First things first though, I want to show you how the watcher connects to his back, because that's something everybody was kind of excited about. So his things open up and we'll talk about those in a minute. And there's plenty of room in there, it looks like, for a watcher. Plenty of open space. Only problem is you don't really use any of that because you have to take every part of the watcher off other than the head and the torso, which leaves this stupid looking peg. It's really a horrible design. And he just really sits in there, and you have to have this piece down at the top. So he sits in there pretty much just like that. That's it right there. That's that big fancy feature of having the watcher connect. And as you can see, it doesn't really fit. It doesn't really stay in. It's pretty unimpressive. So thanks a lot, Tord, for screwing the pooch on that one. I mean, it does sit in there and it looks okay, but it's not really an acceptable implementation. Look at all that empty space. There's no place for you to, I mean, there's plenty of room there, but you can't leave any of the parts on the watcher because they get in the way. And it looks like you could have parts that slide right in there, but you can't, because these close up and there's no room for them. So it's just really a horrible implementation. And you have the little peg thing sticking down. What is that?
Watcher sausage.
I don't think that's good. So I'm sure it can be modified and made to look a little bit better, but it's still pretty hokey, pretty poorly done, Tord. So don't look too much forward to that feature of this figure. We're just going to set that aside and leave it empty for now. Okay, let's talk about paint before we do anything else. The paint overall is pretty good. The shading in the yellow and the orange is done nicely. It's painted relatively cleanly. Everything is pretty solid. Using bright yellows and oranges tend to get a little bit of see-through paint, and it's not really too much of an issue. Everything's done fairly nicely. Overall, I'm pretty pleased with the paint. He looks good, and the silvers are nice. It's pretty game accurate. It seems like there's a lot of black on it, so I'm going to have to go back in the game and check, because I don't remember it being that dark. But maybe it's accurate, so I'm not going to really complain. There are clear parts throughout to have like the floaty pieces that they have in the game, so they're clear with painted bits on the end. You can see it on the hip, the elbow, the back, on the legs. So there's a little bit of that throughout, so that's pretty cool. This elbow has a couple pieces, so well, I guess they both do. Pretty cool overall. It does look pretty nice, and it makes for a nice display. So the paint job is pretty much on point. Nothing too much to complain about there. The sculpt, same thing. Sculpt is really good. Everything looks appropriate, looks accurate. You open these things up and he looks pretty good, pretty accurate to the game. And these are posable. We'll get to that in the articulation. But you can see, I mean, it has everything it needs to have. So overall, I mean, it looks like Todd did a good job. And for the most part he did. Like I said, the watcher's a big issue for me. And the next issue is loose joints. The articulation's good. It's got a lot of points of articulation, but a lot of those points of articulation are really quite loose. First thing, for example, is this piece right here. It tends to fall down a lot on mine. If I don't put it in the right place, it'll just kind of lose its positioning. There's a little bit of a ratchet. There's supposed to be a lot of a ratchet. As you can see, there's grooves on each one of these. So this one you can feel the ratchet a little bit in that regard, but the swivel is really loose. This side, it's still pretty loose. It's going to be a problem. It can be fixed, obviously, but why should I have to? The ratchet's a little bit okay on there, but it's still not great. This one, the swivel is not too loose, and the ratchet's okay. This one, ratchet's okay, and the swivel's okay. Not great, but okay. And this piece is just alright. So those are okay, except for this one and this one. They both fall pretty easily. And they don't really fit together as well as I'd like. I mean, they fit, but they don't stay in place. So, I mean, that can be adjusted, but they don't fit together the way they're supposed to. There's plastic in the way up here, so that would have to be trimmed. So that's kind of a bummer as well. The head articulation is just a ratchet right there, which works. The ratchet's okay there, and then it swivels where the ratchet connects to the head itself. So you have a swivel there. It would be nice to get the head to look up a little bit more, but you can't, although you can look all the way down. The little baby arms on here are connected with standard ball pegs, so they could just swivel around on there. Pretty good enough range of motion. I mean, you're not going to use those a whole lot, so it's not going to be too big of a deal. But they can really swing forward this way a whole lot, but they can't swing out. It would have been nice to get them to point out a little bit more. This one's a little better than this one, but still just kind of weird the way it's limited, and doesn't have to be. And you can play with it a little bit to make it okay. And it's fine, really. It's just something to note. The elbows have a single hinge, and so do the wrists. And those are okay. Not too loose there, so that's not a big deal. These shoulders are connected with a ball peg, so that it'll swivel there. And then it has the ratcheted ball disc, which is actually ratcheted really well for the shoulder. I'm a little worried about that skinny peg though, because the ratchet's pretty rigid, so the peg might break. I'm a little bit nervous about that. The elbow joint is ratcheted, but it's pretty loose. It's not the best right there. And then of course there's a ball peg at this part, which is super duper loose. I mean, it's just enough to hold it in place. So you have to be really careful with that if yours is like mine. It's just enough. It'll probably loosen up a little bit more, so be careful with that. Maybe stick some sticky tack in there. Only problem is it's clear, so it's not going to look great. So that's kind of a bummer. It is nice that it's clear, but I don't like the looseness. Which makes me point out again, this is clear at the bottom, the blade part is clear, so it's a really nice feature. It looks great in person. Same problems on this side. You have the little tiny ball peg, which is kind of loose, and then a really stiff ratchet for the shoulder. The stiff ratchet's okay if that ball peg wasn't so tiny. Same thing, this ratchet is almost non-existent again, so that's pretty flimsy, and then this one's even looser than the blade. So the scatter shot, that's no good. That is no good at all. So I don't care for that, Todd. That's not great. And then of course you can pull either of these off, which is why it's so loose, but it didn't have to be that loose. So they can both come off, but it doesn't do any good. This one, sure, you can take it off to do the assassination thing. This one you can take off, but it doesn't convert to be held like the scatter shot does when a human's holding it. So that's pretty useless. I'd much rather not have it loose. He does have torso articulation in here, so it rocks from side to side. Only mine rocks only to one side, really. Doesn't go too far to the other side, which I'm sure I can get it to go, but it doesn't work as well as I would have liked. And it does it? I don't know if it goes front to back at all. Mine doesn't want to. And they don't really say, so I don't know. I'm gonna have to play with that, but as far as it goes right now, it doesn't really go forward and backwards at all. Just a little bit of side to side. So I don't know. For the hips, we have just a double-ended ball peg, so one in there and one in there. Kind of ugly, but it is there, and it does work. So that gives you all of that articulation. The knees are ratcheted and swivel. They swivel at the top of the knee, and then they're supposed to be ratcheted, but these are just super loose. They only are tight when you get to the very maximum bend, either all the way in or all the way out. And even then, they're still pretty flimsy. And they're really flimsy this way. So getting this guy who's super top heavy and pretty back heavy to stand up is really a problem. These ratchets are pretty junk. So that's really a bummer for me. And like I said, it's tight if you go all the way back, but then he's super short. You don't want that. It looks stupid to have him bent that much. So it should be about like that, I think, or even a little bit more. But that's just flimsy, floppy, no good. So that's another bummer. A lot of bummers with this guy, unfortunately. He's still a good figure, but I wish it was so much more. Let me get this base thing off so I can show you. Each side gets one of these little clear stands, and it is posable. You can snap it on either way. So you can snap it on this way, on the foot so the base is on the inside, or on the outside, and then it swivels however you want. So it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, because they are kind of ugly looking and goofy. but it's okay. The feet, same joints as the knees. They swivel at the foot and then they're ratcheted at the disc. And these are actually tight joints, so that would be good if the knees were good. Then that does it for the articulation. So the knees really make it problematic, and it's really difficult to get this guy to stand properly. So overall it's a good figure, but there are some problems. I do suggest you go pick it up, and maybe you won't have as many problems as I did. It's still really cool and a nice display piece. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned for more reviews, more custom figures, and other good stuff. And in the meantime, keep collecting.